Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wist. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Okay, hello, Lisa Petrucci. Before we talk about Doris Wishman today, would you please introduce yourself?
Well, hi there. Thanks for having me on. My name's Lisa Petrucci, and I am the owner of Something Weird Video, which is a nostalgic video company from Seattle.
Absolutely. And it was started, when was it, like the early 90s?
Yeah, actually, Something Weird started in 1990 by my late husband, Mike Franey.
Yes. And he died like 7 years ago?
Yeah, just about a little over 8 years now. He died in 2014, sadly, of lung cancer. I mean, he spent, over 25 years devoting his life to finding bottom of the barrel lost films and, definitely lived a very big life in that amount of time that he was on the planet. He died when he was 57 years old. So we all miss him very much, but I do my best to try to honor him every day.
That's very sweet. Yeah, I love his commentary tracks with Herschel Gordon Lewis, David Friedman. Those are beautiful.
Oh, aren't they? I know.
Yeah.
Well, I actually just put them on sometimes to hear him and Dave and Herschel or anyone else he's talking to in the commentaries' voices, because it's like having them in the living room.
Aw. All right. So getting to Doris Wishman, I really enjoyed the AGFA and Something Weird collaboration, the release of the films of Doris Wishman, the Twilight years. And I was wondering, how many years was that in the making?
Actually not that long. I've been working with AGFA since about 2015, and, we started out by just, kind of cherry picking some of the classics from the Something Weird vault and releasing those on Blu-ray and, them getting them ready for theatrical, because they're now doing like a whole theatrical arm of AGFA. And if people don't know, AGFA is America Genre Film Archive, and they're based in Austin, Texas. Incredible people.
Yeah.
So, usually every year we discuss what our next year's projects are going to be. And, one of the things that hadn't come out yet were the films of Doris Wishman in a collection. And, recently there's just been so many incredible box sets that have come out. Arrow did the Herschel Gordon Lewis set, and they also did William Griffey. Severin did Andy Milligan, and any number of other directors that they've been working with as well. Vinegar Syndrome's been doing really good collections of people's work. So, we had a bar by which we needed to, rise up to. So, I'm good friends with the owner of the Doris Wishman Library. His name is Jimmy Maslin, and he's the person that Something Weird licensed from for many, many decades. And when we had them out on VHS, then DVD, and he spoke with AGFA, and they were able to work out a deal. And we just decided, because Doris had so many films, that we would probably have to do them in sections. And also there's definitely like a timeline and a type of film that she did at different points in her career. So that kind of made it easy for us to decide to break it up into 3 sections. So literally they just went out the gate. Maybe it was probably just a little over a year before the first release when it came out. So that was when we started working on things. And, they've been doing restorations actually for about maybe a year and a half now. And the first ones that we released were the 1970s films, and which is fun because they're the color ones and they definitely dazzle. And you've got titles like Deadly Weapons and Double Agent 73, which are probably 2 of Doris's most popular films.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. And also, what was the documentary? Let Me Die a Woman. I thought that was an interesting one too.
Oh yeah, and that's actually the latest. That the last film that we have in that collection was made in 1977, and yeah, that definitely. I mean, we can talk quite a bit about Doris's kind of journey with her film career, but that was quite a thing for her to do. I mean, she probably didn't even realize how progressive it was at the time, but yeah, that film packs a punch.
Oh yeah. And I loved Keyholes Are for Peeping.
You actually liked that?
Yeah, I thought it was funny.
Okay, I'll give you that. Which stars Sammy Petrillo, which was, he was kind of considered like a poor man's Jerry Lewis. I don't know how else to describe him. He was in some goofy films, in the late 50s. He was in a movie called Shangri-La in the 1960s, which was a nudist camp movie. From what I heard, Chesty Morgan, it was actually Doris had met Sammy Petrillo down in Florida, and he introduced her to Chesty Morgan. So
Oh,
I guess he was doing a nightclub gig, stand-up comedy or something, which, oh God, who'd want to see that? But anyway, so yes, he is the star of Keyholes Are for Peeping. And what's interesting about that film as well, it was made in 1972. And, there's definitely like a comedy aspect to it. I think that, Doris was trying to, always think outside the box for her. And she hadn't made a comedy, well, intentionally yet. So she wrote the script for that one. And then she ended up like basically just like gathering up all the scraps off the editing room floor from all of her past films and just kind of shoving them into that film. So it's a real interesting one.
yeah. So she definitely has some distinctive visual elements, let's say, as a director. You can kind of tell quickly if it's a Doris Wishman movie. If you've seen, a handful, by the time I got through the set, I feel like now I can identify like a Doris Wishman movie. I could be wrong, but
No, you're right on the money there.
yeah. So for the uninitiated, what can they expect from a Doris Wishman movie?
Well, first of all, we like to consider them almost like guerrilla DIY films,
Mm.
by somebody who went in not really knowing what they were doing and came out the other end with a movie, other than her script. One of the things that people love to see in a Doris Wishman movie is pointing out all the inanimate objects that the camera focuses on. By the time the 70s were there, like these films, the color ones from the 70s, she actually had a little bit more sync sound. But prior to that, most of Doris's movies are either narrated or post dubbed, or just you're looking at the back of people's heads and they're talking, and usually the voices wouldn't match who the person is. Like, it's just very kind of jarring to hear Doris's voice come out of like a pretty young lady. Occasionally that would happen in some of her films, but mostly like focusing in on body parts,
Right.
lovingly lingering on feet and ashtrays, flower arrangements. One of the fun things with people who are familiar with Doris's work is if you start to recognize set decorations from earlier films,
Mm,
and the woman was resourceful, if nothing.
definitely. Okay, so what is your personal favorite movie in the set and why?
Well, in this set, I would say, oh gosh, that's really hard one, because I mean, the 70s ones, they're all really, really great in their own way. And
Mhm.
I'm probably just going to go with the two most popular ones, Deadly Weapons and Double Agent 73. I mean,
Mm.
because they just look so stunning. And, the storyline is ridiculous. You've got this pendulous breasted woman on a killing spree. And I mean, and just, watching Chesty Morgan on film, and she just seems to be totally like, doped up the whole time. Like, she kind of got glassy, staring into space look, and her acting is terrible. And, once
Yeah.
again, it wasn't her voice being used on the, in the film. It was, some other actor doing her lines and whatnot. But no, those ones are great. And they definitely like little time capsules from the 1970s, the fashion and
Mm.
this just really tacky decor everywhere. And yeah, and they just kind of like, just they like assault your eyes.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I like that. Assault your eyes. I love how things are never in focus.
Yeah, well,
Well, not never,
surprisingly,
never, but like when it happens, it's
there's
pretty fun.
definitely like a lot of things that are just kind of like, I have to say though, I mean, C. Davis Smith was her main cinematographer, and he
Mm.
in and of himself was an incredible cinematographer, and
Mhm.
could capture a shot. And that there's a lot of like really, really beautifully designed frames in a Doris Wishman film. But then
Mhm.
I think she would tell him to do something, and that's when it got kind of wonky.
I like that. So I'm always a fan of a Frank Henenlotter commentary track. Who do you think gives the best audio commentary track in this set?
Oh, don't ask me that because I'm friends with all these
Yeah,
people. I
yeah,
don't
I
want
know, I know.
I don't want anybody to feel slighted. They're all really good in their own way, and then I'll tell you why. So
Yeah.
that's my answer.
Okay, fair enough.
Um, you've got Michael Bowen, who you could probably consider him Doris's. He's her biographer, but he's almost like her adopted son. I mean,
Mhm.
this 80-something-year-old woman adopts this 40-something-year-old man, and like, takes him under her wing, and he's basically the custodian of her legacy in so many ways. So
Mhm.
he has a lot of different insights and information that many people don't have. And he's also an academic, and so he comes from it from that perspective. Then you've got Frank, who he in and of himself is an incredible cinephile. He
Yeah,
knows everything about film, but he's also hilarious.
he's
So
really funny.
yeah, I mean, it's just super fun to listen to his. And I mean, I could listen to Bleeding Skulls, Annie Choi, and Joseph Samba all day long. They're good friends, and they just have such a good rapport with each other, and they're really fun to listen to as well. So
Yeah.
um
All right,
and
fair enough.
yeah, and also I was going to say, Lars and Brett doing the Immoral Three. I mean,
All right.
I that was a good. I mean, I like them all, but
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I
yeah.
said, everybody definitely brings their own perspective to it, and
Mhm.
that was one of the things we want to do with this set. Is people might think, well, why don't you just have like the most quote expert person doing all of them? It's like, well,
Mm.
no, because there's so much to Doris's over and like different perspectives that I
Yeah.
think it's more fun to hear that and consider her work in different ways.
Yeah, they all get one. They all get one track.
Yes, and it'll be that way for pretty much all the box sets as well.
Okay, beautiful. And approximately how many more Doors sets can we expect?
Well, I can't give out specific information about what's going to be on them, but there will
Fair.
be two more collections. So one
Nice.
is coming out fairly soon,
Hmm, hmm.
which is the middle one. And then there will be another one, which is the earliest films. So, but I won't tell you
Oh,
what's on those. It'll be a
okay,
big
okay.
surprise.
We gotta have something to look forward to, right?
Oh, yeah. And, I'm especially excited about the next one. It's got all my favorites.
Nice. Okay. And so I guess we'll get the third set, sometime near the end of the year, sometime early
Yeah.
next year.
No, 2022 is the year of Doris Wishman.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, that's very exciting. I would love for you to give me some personal stories about your interactions with Doris Wishman.
Well, I only actually got to meet Doris in the flesh once. It
Okay.
was at a film screening in Boston. They were showing Bad Girls Go to Hell. Although I did speak to her on the phone many times. And
Mm,
I mean, I've worked so long with this material and, talked with people who knew her and, just my friendship with Michael Bowen and Jimmy Maslin. It's like I feel like I channel her a lot. It's kind of like I've learned a lot about Doris by osmosis. So, but that one time meeting her, I mean, it was a trip because I mean,
mm.
she is just so sassy and, she's kind of cantankerous. And when you see her, she usually has on her trademark sunglasses, dark shades, and she's doing her Hollywood glamour thing, or you know, us women as we get older, we like to camouflage a few things. So, but I think it was more for the glamour aspect. I mean, Doris was always dressed to the nines at any of her events,
Mm.
and she was at this screening in Boston. And I should say that preface it with it. There was a blizzard that night,
Oh.
so anybody who came to the show, I mean, they really must have wanted to see a Doris Wishman movie or meet her. But there's Doris in the theater wearing open-toed shoes, like those
Mm.
mules that slip-on high heel mules, and her little dress and like her jacket definitely wasn't warm, but it was very, she was very well put together, and people were coming up and having things signed and whatnot, and she was very courteous and kind to everybody, and we had some laughs here and there. But the funniest thing she said, some guy was in her orbit, and she did have her glasses on the whole time. And I think she took them off for a minute and he snapped a picture and she went bananas. And she's like,
Oh.
"Oh, you monster." It was so funny. So, yeah, I'm glad I got a good, Doris story to come away with.
That's great. So you mentioned Michael Bowen earlier. Tell people a little bit about his book.
Well, he's been working on this book since, the 90s,
Yeah.
and it will eventually come out. It's getting closer and closer, but it's basically going to be the biography of Doris Wishman. And the thing is, there's so much, he has so much information, and he ended up with her archives and, everything. So when you have to go through a person's life like that, I mean, you find out all kinds of different information that nobody's known before. I mean, nothing bad by any means, but it's just like you want to be able to put everything in a context. And
Mm.
I get it. I mean, I've got a similar situation with David F. Friedman. If people don't know who he is, he's like the mighty monarch of exploitation film. He was a peer of Doris's. In fact, he had very nice things to say about Doris in any interviews that you hear. And whatnot. So yeah, he thought she was a good little filmmaker, and he just thought it was odd that this middle-aged lady was making dirty movies. I think a lot of people must have thought that. I mean, she started making films when she was 4. Husband, she had only just recently married, passed away. Prior to that, she had been a film booker for her cousin Max Rosenberg, so she was very familiar with the theatrical booking and theater business. Rosenberg dealt mostly in art house films from Europe, and so she was on the pulse and aware of what was going on. And I think she carried that through most of her career. I mean, if you look at the types of films that she was making from her first film Hideout in the Sun, which was 1959, she was definitely aware of what her other colleagues were doing and what was making good box office. And the woman was making films up until the year she died. So she had a film in production when she was 90 years old. So
Wow. That's inspiring. And I guess we should talk about how it must be a little frustrating for you and for all fans that she gets kind of pigeonholed. It's kind of like, well, what she said, to Conan O'Brien, he said, he basically said, like, why are you a woman making these movies? And she said, well, why not?
yeah, well, what's interesting about Doris is she never considered herself a feminist by any means. And in
Mm.
fact, if you called her like a lady filmmaker or a
Mhm.
female filmmaker or a woman filmmaker, she actually would take offense. I mean, she's like, I'm a filmmaker.
Yeah.
And that was that. And the interesting thing is that she is probably one of the most prolific female filmmakers of like the 1960s and 70s that nobody's ever heard of, or hardly
Mhm.
anyone has ever heard of.
Right,
So
right.
it's going to be nice for her to get more attention and accolades that she deserves, but it's taken this long, and posthumously it's all happening. Probably the biggest thing in the last few years before this collection was that you know her movies were shown on the Criterion channel. I mean, that's the gold standard. And
So,
who would have thought? I certainly didn't. But after the first few gorgeous transfers that AGFA did, films like Nude on the Moon and Bad Girls Go
mm,
to Hell, and some of the most classic ones from um, her career, they were put up on Criterion, and she was introduced to a lot of people who weren't aware of her, which is pretty incredible.
oh yeah, very cool. You were talking about David Friedman earlier. I loved the AGFA Something Weird release of She Freak. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, I'm glad you like that. Yeah, that was a labor of love for me because, well, She Freak's one of my favorite films, and I also know it was one of Dave's favorite films. So
Yeah.
I really wanted to honor him and do something special because that film deserves it. And out of his movies, it's probably, well, the most popular one and best known.
Yeah. And I love the footage of just like old carnival footage. That's
Oh
so
yeah.
cool.
And
Yeah.
that was from his, his own collections and stuff. And
Uh,
I mean, what's funny is a lot of people think that movie is really boring. and,
it's
and the
slower
reason,
than like, Blood Feast, right? But
well, it's
yeah.
almost like a documentary about
Mm.
carnivals, except there's like a weird side story going on at the same time.
It's good stuff. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you very much for your time. It was really nice chatting with you today.
Yeah. And
Is
I'll
there?
just mention one more
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Before we actually did this collection of the Doris Wishman films, Something Weird put out a record album, a
Right.
soundtrack album of
Yeah.
Doris Wishman music. So it's basically the audio of trailers and incidental music and opening theme credit music from her films. And, there's a nice little liner notes in there talking about where the music came from. Michael Bowen did an incredible essay about library music and, just that whole concept in the 1960s that a lot of these exploitation film directors, you know, basically, went to these, music libraries and would
Mm.
have music curated for them. And so when you listen to many 60s exploitation films in particular, you'll hear a lot of the same music, and it kind of gives it a
Yeah.
really kind of groovy swinging vibe. And then her niece, Judith Kushner, was a songwriter. And so the earlier films have like original music in them. So it's super fun to be able to have that all in one place and for people to hear it.
That's great. Is there anything else, something weird has coming out that you would like to mention?
Just we're going to continue doing Blu-ray releases with AGFA and some of our other partners, and it's just an exciting time for Something Weird because we're going into like another chapter now. I'm probably going to be starting something called Something Weird Press, which will be
Cool.
books and magazines related to the content that Something Weird has had in its catalog for the last 30 years or so, and that'll be fun to be able to actually use the archive and let people see images they've never seen before. And I'll probably
Nice.
be having people who write who are experts at this stuff, or
Mhm.
have a different perspective, contributing to the publications. So lots on the horizon.
Ooh, that's very exciting. Sorry, who are the other labels? Like I know Agfa, but there was the
uh,
Mondo Kane on movies on Severin. I really like those. I have those
oh,
movies too.
So yes, I've been working with Severin Films, the Film Detective, Alternative Cinema. They have a sub-label called Pop Cinema. We'll
Right.
be working with Distripix. There's quite a
Okay.
few other companies that, depending on the type of film that it is, because the Something Weird catalog is just so eclectic that
Oh yeah.
there wasn't really any one label that I think wanted it all. So it's nice to have these labels that I work with who are, they're kind of, they got their niche, and I've
Mm.
been plugging my movies into their niche. So I'm really pleased with, the way things have been going with all of that.
All right. Well, fantastic. Lisa, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.